Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the 2030 podcast hosted by me, Matt Lundy. Today, we are fortunate to have Tim Wee, events manager at Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition and zero waste engineer at Zero W, as our guest to talk about climate change through the lens of personal action, zero waste, and humanity's most efficient form of movement, biking. So, Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
So, getting right into it, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, sustainability in your day-to-day life, and what motivated you to get into this space?
Let's see. So I've always been sort of a scientist at heart. When I was a kid, I collected insects. I was a budding entomologist. And I have to say, 4-H actually sort of got me on the path to eventually caring a lot about our environment and being zero waste. I learned how to do a lot of things myself. I got in touch with nature, how food grows. I didn't actually do animal husbandry. That's one piece of 4-H I didn't do. But I learned how to repair things, and I learned how to be at one with nature, as it were. And I went camping and hiking, and I learned about bicycling, how to repair bikes early on. Actually, I didn't learn that through 4-H per se, but as a kid, I just biked everywhere, and that was my main form of transportation. I didn't succumb to getting a motor vehicle until I moved to Silicon Valley when I was, almost 30 at the time. I
Oh,
came
wow.
here and I got a car, and I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd stayed stuck with bicycling. But then I've always cycled a lot my entire life, bike touring, commuting. I'm a transportation cyclist mainly, so I bike to get places. That's a little bit about me and biking.
All right. Yeah, I would say even if you did end up getting a car, going just bikes till you were 30 is a pretty impressive achievement in at least American society. I would say we're so car dependent. Um, but like keeping the, I guess, mode of biking is often like when you're a teen before you start driving, biking is the way to get around. But being able to keep doing that, I think, is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I hope more people keep doing that and
Yeah.
just not get a car at all. You can save a lot of money. It's about $1 million for an average U.S. car if you choose not to get the car through your lifetime, and that's a Western,
Yeah, yeah.
Western civilization. That's a lot of money. I'm
That
happy my
is.
oldest son has said he's never going to get a car. He knows how to
Wow.
drive. He's got a driver's license. And he's a scientist. Actually, he's a real scientist. He actually got his PhD and is doing his part to reduce climate change in that space. But yeah, I'm doing my part and by encouraging people to bicycle and lots of other things about going
Yeah.
zero waste.
Yeah, that's it's something that it's an impression I get from some of my friends in Europe. The idea of why would I ever get a car? I'm not going to get a car. It's so much hassle, cost. I can get around just fine without it. And so it's nice to see that that is a possibility here in the U.S. as well, since it so often seems like it isn't. And then, so I have to ask, you're repping the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. You're wearing a T-shirt for it right now. So can you tell us a little bit about that organization and how how has it been biking everywhere? Whereas to most people, I think almost anyone hearing this, they would think it's essentially impossible to bike everywhere in American or Western life.
Yeah, in Silicon Valley in particular, we've got beautiful weather. We've got huge wide roads. There is a strong preference for cars here. It's a very
Yeah.
strong car culture in all of California, United States in general. Um, yeah, I was in Boston, which was easier
Okay.
to just, you have to pay a lot for parking and you have to find a place to park. It's hard. A car is having hard. It's like San Francisco. Having a car is hard.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work. In Silicon Valley, there's lots of space, lots of free parking, and that's such a huge mistake having free parking. You should really have to pay your way, and someone has to pay. There's no free lunch.
Yeah.
Someone has to pay somewhere. The problem with cars is we're unfortunately putting debt forward. We're having our kids pay the cost of us driving today, which was one of the big reasons now that I'm a huge proponent of bicycling. And I have to say, when I did move out to California when I was almost 30, I did actually join at the time was the Santa Clara Valley Bicycle Coalition,
Okay.
Santa Clara Valley Bicycle Association, sorry.
Uh,
And it was SCVBA. It was longer. And I became a member. I became a life member, and then I helped along with some other people to change it to its name, Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. So I was a board member. This was 30
okay.
years ago. Um, and then And then I got busy with kids and work, and then sort of I was still biking, but not as much. But then as I grew older, my kids were then off on their own. I started biking again a lot again,
Okay.
and then I decided to. I have a 21-year-old car at this point that I don't want to drive hardly at all. I just want to let it sit, and every now and then I may need to move something heavy.
Yeah.
But unless I'm moving something really heavy, and that's like more than 700, 800 pounds heavy, then I can move all of that other stuff by my bike. In fact, volume wise, I can move more with my bike and my bike trailers that can fit in just about anyone's car, normal car. I mean, if they have a cargo van, we're
Yeah.
about, I can actually sometimes haul more than a cargo van volume wise on my bike trailers. But most of the time for a normal size car, I can haul way more on my bike. Not weight wise,
Wow.
but,
Volume.
well, 800 pounds actually is quite a bit even in a car, if you
That
think about
is.
it. But yeah, so I've hauled stuff to set up events for Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition and for Bike Sunnyvale, which is a little local group that's associated with Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, and for Friends of Cheesecake Trail, and for teaching people how to ride as part of a county bike program that I helped run. So I can haul tons around,
Yeah.
literally, on my
Sounds
bike.
like it.
Yeah.
And so I guess a question that pops into my mind. So you can haul all of that just on normal like bike lanes and city streets. Works fine.
Yep.
Wow.
It works fine because it's the trailers follow behind me, and sometimes and I'll have to send you a picture of this. Sometimes I'm
Sure.
hauling one, two, sometimes three trailers. I now have actually four trailers, and today I just finished um, hooking up the arrangement, so I could actually pull four trailers all at
Wow.
once as part of a train behind me, and it tracks pretty well. I haven't actually done it. Actually, the larger four trailer set I haven't done. I've done a different four trailer set when I borrowed someone else's trailer I was picking up for them. But yeah, you can. I can haul a lot. And I'm trying to
Wow.
show people that I don't need a car to move a lot of stuff around. Yeah, it takes me a little longer. I go slower, but I get there and you
Yeah.
just plan a little bit in advance, and I get there completely carbon free. I mean, as far as fossil fuel carbon free.
Yeah.
I have a little exhaling myself, but I'm part of the carbon cycle.
Yeah.
And trees, breathe in what I breathe out,
I think that's an
and then we have a
okay
virtuous
emissions
cycle.
amount.
Yes, it's an
Yeah.
okay emissions amount.
So I guess onto the emissions and emissions reductions. Is biking a silver bullet for climate change? If we get everyone on two wheels, what is there a certain kind of impact we would have, whether that's in a quantitative amount or what would that kind of is that a big push to lower emissions by getting a lot more people biking?
Oh, absolutely. And biking is a lot of different winds. One is the climate. So as far as CO2 emissions, bicycling is, and as far as energy and just resource consumption, bicycling is the most efficient form of transportation around, as you mentioned
Yeah,
earlier. It is really efficient and much faster than walking or running.
of
Uses less
course.
energy than those to get, and I can haul a lot more also when I'm
True.
biking, even those for my trailers. But in addition to so climate change is a huge one, and that definitely solves a near uh, term uh, emergency we have with climate change. It's going to hit people in increasing fashions. I mean,
Yeah,
we've already had more fires, more droughts, more superstorms, our Earth's getting warmer, more energy in our system that can cause more storms and also cause droughts and famines and even actually to some degree pandemics. As we
yeah,
press hard on the Earth, different things have to move around and we get exposed to other vectors. And well, let's just speak of pandemics. We have too many people on Earth. We're huge monoculture, and monocultures in
yeah,
agriculture are dangerous. They're just we fall prey to diseases, and lo and behold, we move around a lot. There's a lot of us, and so
yeah,
diseases are happy to use us as food. But back to climate change and bicycling. Yeah, not only does bicycling help with climate change, it makes you healthier because you get exercise. It improves your connection to your community because you meet people, say hi, they see you, and I see them. You get more in touch with nature because you're actually part of nature rather than walling yourself off in this enclosed, metal and glass
yeah,
plastic cocoon where you don't get to interact with other people so much. So you sort of glare at them through the window, but it's hard to see other people inside of a
yeah,
car. And a bicyclist, you're there, you're
yeah.
open, you can talk back and forth as you go by.
That's
And so
something.
yeah.
Just to interject. That's something I've heard with motorcyclists talking about. Oh, they're in it. They're not in the protective shell, so they're still in the world. But like to the next level, just biking as opposed to motorbiking. you're feeling it a lot more. Like you're still
Yes.
in the motorcycle, it's still like a layer of removal that you probably a bet cost analysis for speed, sure, but it's not the same level as straight biking.
Yeah, because you're not going as slowly. You're not going at human scale
Yeah,
speed. You're going pretty fast. They're often very loud, and often
true.
you've got this really heavy duty helmet around you that you've kind of people have trouble seeing you. And a bike, they can see you smile if you're not
Yeah,
wearing a mask,
yeah,
which these days bicycling is naturally socially distant, so you can
true.
do it outside pretty well because you tend to be pretty far from other people when you're biking, even when you're biking in a group.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, so there's a climate change, there's a community, there's the environment, the material use. A bicycle uses hardly very little, material, just a little bit of metal, a little bit of rubber. So very efficient use of materials versus a car is
yeah,
a few tons of metal and glass and plastic, which it took a lot of resources to create in the climate change space, but it's also
yes,
resource consumption in the world.
yeah,
And then when you dispose of it, it's a huge amount of energy and materials again to recycle it or God forbid, trash it.
yeah,
Bicycles are just much less waste. And bicycles last a long time. I had one of my bicycles before the frame finally broke and I decided not to repair it. But I was doing it for 40 years
wow,
and probably 50,000 miles on that particular bicycle. And I've done about 130,000 miles so far in my bicycling career,
okay,
with hopefully another 100,000 still to come as I hit retirement and able to go wandering around the world more.
yeah. That's quite the number for biking, um,
Yeah.
but it's good to hear. So we have all these really good benefits to biking, from climate change to people to resource use. So how do we get more people biking? Looking at almost any, like say any city in the Bay Area or Silicon Valley, even with a nice weather and wide roads, we compare that to like say European cities like Copenhagen, which probably has stereotypes of more rain, more overcast. How do we get to somewhere like that? Is it as simple as kind of telling people about the benefits of biking and informing, or is it also some level of cities and local governments making it easier to bike, prioritizing that in terms of city planning? What are the kinds of ways that we promote this and we get more people on board?
Both of those and some other things too.
Okay.
So we do need to continue to talk about it. We need to normalize it and have people recognize, wow, there are a lot of benefits to biking, but that I've just mentioned. We do need to have cities make it easier and more attractive. A lot of people on roads do feel threatened by these metal monsters, roaming our streets with
Yeah.
drivers behind them that aren't always that well trained. And they're controlling these machines that can very easily kill quite a few people.
Yeah.
In fact, almost 40,000 people a year die in the US just from crashes from motor vehicles.
Yeah.
Bicyclists and bicycles don't cause many deaths. It's like 1,000 times safer if you just look at just bicycles by themselves and how
Yeah.
much damage they create. I mean, you can still die on a bicycle. It's not completely risk-free,
Yeah.
but it is so much safer than driving, in addition to the reduced resource use.
Yeah.
So communities in our area, cities and counties, the state, our federal government, they have a role to play in having better standards and putting better facilities in place so that cars have their space, but bicyclists and pedestrians should have their safe places also. You mentioned Denmark and the Netherlands. They have great facilities. They realized somewhat further back, further back in history, that they really needed to shift to more efficient means of transportation. Cars also use up a lot of space on the
Yeah.
road as well as parking space. And you just run out of space. In Europe, they're much tighter
Yeah.
on space, so they need to use it more efficiently. Now, there's one other really important piece. It's kind of a version of extended producer responsibility.
Okay.
We need to make sure that car drivers and manufacturers, they account for the full costs of a car. A lot of our costs are hidden behind, you automatically pay for big wide roads through your taxes.
Yeah.
And appreciate that took a lot of money to put there. We have subsidized oil companies to a huge amount, which we end up paying in tax, but we don't see that connected to the car.
Yeah.
And so we really need to tie car costs and have them upfront to show people, yeah, it's about $1 million that you can save, and then have them actually confront that cost. Say, oh, I've got to
Yeah.
pay $1 million for the privilege of using a car when they could use that money to do other things. And that's the versus bicycling, I should
Yeah,
say, because
that's
bicycling does cost something, but the difference between having a car and having a bicycle is about $1 million over your lifetime and
which
the
is a
opportunity cost and
pretty
money saved.
big number,
That's a pretty big number,
eye-catching
but
number.
people don't appreciate it because
Yeah,
there's insurance, there's registration, there's taxes, there's all these facilities, there's free parking. We need to have people pay for the parking up front
yeah,
so that they're paying out in a place that they don't realize they're paying, but they end up paying it anyways. And we have to stop pushing a lot of these costs forward to our kids, which are going to suffer. We're eating and drinking, be merry today, but borrowing against their future by
yeah.
consuming so many resources and doing too much with it. So yeah, so biking, a huge win for us. I'm hugely a fan of transportation, of that as transportation. And actually, one other thing I've mentioned is
Sure.
it's fun. Biking is a
Yeah,
blast. So if you're going to get someplace, you must have fun while you do it.
yeah, very much so. Actually, just in my town in Morgan Hill, they recently passed an ordinance. They're going to be dropping the main downtown road from 2 lanes to one to promote pedestrian and bike usage. I think most of the lane is going to biking, and then the rest of it is going to storefronts and pedestrian usage.
And that's a great move. Several other communities locally, in Willow Glen, they had a road diet on Lincoln Ave. Um, they objected. They said, "Oh no, we need our space for cars." But now that they've done it, it's a great pedestrian biking mall where people spend a lot more money at the stores there because they linger
Yeah,
longer and they see stuff, they smell stuff. When you're in a car, you just whiz by, you don't appreciate it. You go someplace else, you can go a long distance. When you have a great community facility like that um, cherishes pedestrians and bicyclists, they stay and they shop and they support local businesses rather than having everything shipped to them long distances or driving a
yeah.
long way to get to something.
Well, there are similar objections in our community, especially on traffic. So I'm hoping that we'll have the same kind of success and that it will be a big positive because having slower, safer streets for pedestrians and for biking is something that sounds really uh, like a much better time. So I'll be hoping that we have that same positive experience with it.
And it's not easy, by the way, to make this change. So
Yeah.
you and others who are listening to this, you need to get involved with your local government. You need
Yeah.
to realize that government is for and by the people in the United States, and that we can make the environment and the community that we want, but we have to make a concerted effort. Um, a lot of people sort of fall back on what has always been and say, "Oh, that's just easier, just to stay the way it has been,"
Yeah.
which is the car culture we have. In Holland, their switch, they realized that it was killing a lot of kids' cars. And so they said, okay, we need to change this. What's a safer form of transportation? So for them, it was their kids and how many kids were dying from getting hit by cars that was a crystallizing factor that got them to switch over. I'm hoping climate change is the crystallizing factor for us. We're realizing it's
Yeah.
coming and it's the real effects in California. And it feels hard to not be able to drive as much, but we really need to make it seriously harder to drive and have drivers pay their
The full
cost as
cost.
such, not
Yeah.
have it full cost. So not make it easier for them to drive more, but make it easier for people to walk and bike so that they see, oh, I can walk and bike easily to wherever I need to go
Yeah.
and support my local community. And when people realize that it makes practical sense, then people start shifting because people follow, water flows downhill. They want the
Yeah.
easy path. So it's hard to get over the hump, but if we redesign our environment, then we get people over the hump and everyone follows the new path and sets up new habits that are healthier.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And that leads perfectly into this next question I want to ask. But first, I just want to make a note that I remember, I think I came across it on Twitter recently. It was a picture, I think it was Amsterdam, and it was Amsterdam wasn't always Amsterdam. Kind of, so Amsterdam as some sort of poster child of lots of biking, lots of low car priorities, and public transportation, walking, a very kind of a city that we're talking about moving towards. And people would be like, "Oh, that's other city. They've always been that. We can't be that." But in terms of, like you said, making a decision, there was a comparison of Amsterdam, and it was either the 60s or the 70s, and it was just a mass of traffic and cars taking up the entire street, and in a very chaotic way, little to no room for bikes, little room for pedestrians. But seeing that they made the active decision that, oh, this is something we want to prioritize, and looking long term, this is going to be a benefit. and making that change. So to see that it's possible even for a place where it's always been this way, but we can make the change, make the choice to do it differently.
Yeah.
And then going into what you were just saying, so in terms of making it easier and making I guess facilitating the personal choice for it. A common conversation in the world of climate action is personal versus systemic. There are kind of seemingly, I would say, conflicting tides where one side advocates kind of remove your personal carbon footprint and personally live zero waste, don't produce any trash yourself, and another side downplaying those personal changes, saying that's not going to make a difference. We need, excuse me, that's not going to make a difference. We need big systemic changes because, for example, like a lot of people talk about a low number, maybe even a double digit or single digit number of companies emit 70% of CO2. So I think we kind of touched upon this in talking about making public changes that allow for personal choices to be different and easier. So how do you kind of see this dichotomy? Do you think it has to be one or the other, or it's something that's more, I guess, wholesale or a combined approach?
A combined approach. It's a continuum. An ocean is made up of billions of drops, right? So we're all drops, all are individuals, but by getting together, we can make a big difference for our personal choices, and then also getting together with our voice. Every vote counts. By getting our governments and the companies to make other larger systemic changes, then we get more individuals. So it goes back and forth. We need people to be motivated and take action. That's why the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition is here. We get bicyclists and environmentalists and climate change people to all rally behind, let's make it better for bicyclists and help save our world through the bicycle and make our community, environment, economy healthier and more vibrant through bicycling. That's, the Silicon Valley method. The Bicycle Coalition method. So it's all of those. And so far, we're only talking about transportation. Of course, I've gone zero waste in a lot of other ways, that's why I'm considered a zero waste engineer in my other hat that I wear with zerow.org, because I help teach people all the other ways beyond just transportation about how to go zero waste, which if we have enough time, we can get there too. But there's so much more I can talk about in bicycling still as well.
Yeah. So I guess maybe one more on bicycling and then a little bit on the zero waste in total. This is probably asked a lot or a feature in a lot of talks and presentations you give. But can you tell us a little bit about the cross-country biking and any big takeaways or strong memories you have from that big venture?
Yeah, so I've been across the country twice, once as a student when I was in college, and then more recently, 2019, I went from, let's see, where am I there? Oh. There we go. I went from here to there, from San Francisco to Boston.
Okay.
It was a business trip, really. It was a 5,000-mile business trip on bicycle. I started my home in Sunnyvale. I went to San Francisco, then I went down the coast to San Diego, and then biked across the U.S. through Washington, D.C., New York City, and to Boston in the end, which is where I had a lot of friends I wanted to see. And my college reunion, I was going back to that also. Cool. And while going across the country, I gave 254 talks about oceans, plastic, climate change, and kids. Because in order to save our world, our little spaceship Earth, more people need to know about all the options they have, and that we really do need to make a concerted effort to save our world for our kids. And climate change is a huge disaster coming. Related to that, another fossil fuel created problem is plastics.
Yeah.
Wonderful, durable material, but we use it in a disposable fashion.
Yeah.
And so when you create it, then we just toss it, and then it lasts for 1,000 years out there, polluting our environment. So we have to do something about that, and really hurting our oceans, which is why I was talking about oceans. In that cross-country trip, I visited 24 aquariums. I gave talks at almost all of them, in addition to all the other talks I gave at schools and churches and libraries and in people's houses and other places all across the country.
Yeah, I will say.
A lot of great memories, by the way, of just meeting fantastic people all across the country. When you get one-on-one with people, bicycling is very non-threatening. So you stop by, you say hi, they want to know where you're going, they chat with you, you chat with them, you find out what you do with them and how their environment is and what their life is like, and they learn about you. It's so much fun, and people host you, and they often buy you. I had some people I was eating and chatting with people, they paid for my dinner there.
Oh, wow.
Or people put me up in their house or in their backyard or wherever as part of warmshowers.org and other friends and family. it was a wonderful experience going across the country. And I'm
Sounds
really
like it.
hoping that I'll be able to retire while I'm still fairly healthy and be able to venture the world with my wife and go on bicycle adventures with her. She felt very abandoned for those 3 months, I have to admit. I talked to her every day, but having me gone for 3 months was a definite hardship for her. And I'd really like to have her along with me.
Yeah.
So we have plans to do that when we retire, which hopefully will be sometime next 2 years.
Very cool. Yeah, as a kid, I was always really confused. Like, you would see, say, like a superhero, like Plastic Man. He would be, his whole thing was basically like Mr. Fantastic. He can stretch very far. And as a kid, I had no conception of that because I was like, plastics are rigid. They're not malleable. Um, and just the whole idea of how we use plastics as it can be a rigid material. It can be something we bend into anything to make it a rigid material, but then we just toss it, uh, which seems like such a counterintuitive use of the material. But I guess just because it's been so cheap, the cheapest material we found. That's
Well, and because there's huge subsidies for fossil fuel
Yeah,
companies, they're getting their resources for free from the earth. They're not paying the full cost of them.
yeah,
And
and they're not like
industry has made
paying
it,
that it goes into the ocean. There's not a
yeah.
payment for that.
And yeah, for the trash side, everyone needs to be fully accountable for everything they create. So you have a full circle economy. Everything comes
Yeah,
back, and you aren't just tossing something. Because right now, manufacturers, they make something and they sell it and the trash to the consumer. The consumer goes, okay, I've got this. What am I going to do with it? The only option for them, they don't own factories
yeah,
of their own, so they can't make something new with it. They have to toss it, and then there's a burden on the individuals, there's a burden on the governments, and then it can become the burden on our environment. So we're just tossing out, and
yeah,
expecting the environment to do something with plastic, which the environment's never seen plastic before. It's kind
yeah,
of a new kind of material,
completely.
and then the environment's stuck with it, as well as extra CO2 and other pollutants.
Yeah,
So it's interesting that manufacturers are in their factories, they try very much for zero waste because in a manufacturing environment, all waste is money lost.
yeah,
So if we make manufacturers responsible for the trash and the resulting product and having to bring it back, they will figure out a way because of their economic interest, if they're responsible for it, to
yeah,
reduce their costs to make it as the whole system as cost effective as possible.
yeah.
So I really hope that more companies will take back everything they create and then make something new from it, or recycle it, or dispose of it responsibly. Doesn't put a stress on our Earth's environment, which really means it needs to be circular. We need to
Yeah,
reuse
yeah.
things. The Our environment has always been circular for millions and billions of years. It
Until now.
consumes and reuses everything. It
Yeah,
doesn't go into a one-way facility and then end there and stop. It keeps cycling.
yeah. One of the an odd place that this showed up for me recently is we got a new dog toy for my dogs, and I was able to find a place that was big on recycling, but it's big to the point of if it gets damaged or broken or whatever, you send the material back to the company and they just make a new dog toy out of it. So hopefully it's not just dog toys; it's we get that across the board. But
Yes.
so touching on that, would you want to talk a little bit about zero waste generally, or how you do zero waste, or uh, any other kinds of issues in sustainability that don't always get the attention they should?
Yeah, so transportation is one huge place to go zero waste as far as materials and energy. But then our houses, they produce a lot of CO. They use a lot of materials
Yeah,
and they produce a lot of pollution if they're powered by fossil fuels. So a lot of people have water heaters and furnaces that use fossil fuels to create heat. A lot of people previously had a lot of fossil fuels used to create electricity, which houses use also. So make your house more efficient, make sure it doesn't lose energy is important. And my house now actually is a net energy producer. I'm a little power company because I've got
nice.
solar on my roof and we generate more electricity than we use. And our house is fully electric. There's no fossil fuels left in the house. So we replaced our furnace and our water heater with a heat pump HVAC system and a heat pump water heater, so that we can go all electric. And then we don't have to worry about the natural gas burning down our house or flame from that
Yeah,
or in an earthquake. So it actually made our house safer in a lot of ways, as well as being sustainable. And it reduced our costs. So actually, it was like a win there too. By putting solar on our house with Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
yeah,
and them paying us for extra energy we generate at a reasonable market rate, it made it advantageous for us to make extra electricity to sell. And the electricity we did make was actually cheaper than what we could buy otherwise a lot of the time. So it was a big win for us to go all solar and make our house all electric. So that was a big win.
Yeah.
And then in the other big quadrant of zero waste, which people typically think of as the only zero waste places, just not throwing out trash. I've applied zero waste basically to everything I look at, the whole cycle of everything I do, my transportation, my housing, and then what I purchase. I have always paid close attention to making sure I get quality products. I've been a big fan of Consumer Reports, Consumers Union, donate to them, so that I know what I'm buying.
Yeah.
So I get a quality product that lasts a long time. But then I now reach further than that and I look at, so what's going to happen end of life for that product? So I try to buy stuff that's easy to recycle versus, sometimes plastic's just the most practical, durable material for certain kinds of things. But sometimes I will pay a little more for a metal item because I can recycle it, and it's actually, that metal is very, very durable, lasts even longer than plastic for a lot of applications, or glass, depending again on the use case. Since I do carry a lot of things on my bicycle, having like containers that are glass, sometimes problematic because the bicycle does bounce around more. It's not soft and cushy like a car is inside all the time. So I have opted for some strategic reusable plastic containers that I can go shopping with, for instance. I try to get all my stuff when I go to the grocery store. I try not to buy trash, which saves me money because I don't have to buy the stuff that then I have to throw out. And then I don't have it to throw out. So I bring my own containers. And luckily, during COVID, it was really hard because a lot of places were really paranoid about touching anything, even though COVID didn't spread from touch. And it is important to actually have clean containers. But if you trust me to wash my containers in my dishwasher, get them pretty sterile, and be responsible for my own health, I'm not going to bring a dirty container to a store to buy stuff in because then it would just hurt me and my family. So I wash my stuff and make sure it's very sanitary. I handle it properly. I bring it to a store now. They can put stuff back in my containers again, thankfully. So I was shopping at Zanato's before pandemic. Zanato's got really paranoid about stuff, and I stopped shopping there because I couldn't use my own container. I started buying more stuff online. So I could buy in bigger bulk with less packaging. So I used to just buy a container of nuts. I'd bring my thing in the bulk bin, fill it up, and bring it home with nuts. Since I couldn't do that, I actually went to the provider for where they bought their nuts and bought nuts directly from them, but in 10-pound and 20-pound quantities, directly. But then luckily I had a freezer to store some of the stuff so I could keep it long enough because, that's just a lot of nuts.
That's a lot.
Now, during COVID, by the way, there's another, to go zero waste, there was a new service that started up in the San Francisco Bay Area and has since spread to Los Angeles also. And I hope they're really successful. They're called zerogrocery.com.
Okay.
And they make zero waste purchasing for groceries super, super easy because they provide all the containers. You don't have to have your own containers to figure that out. And they deliver that to your doorstep. So online, you pick out what you want, and then they deliver it to you the next day in reusable containers that they take back, they wash, they process, and they refill for someone else to deliver to them.
Okay.
So there is a subscription fee for them, and I do pay a little bit. I tip the people who are delivering, so they make hopefully a reasonable living. But then it saves me a lot of time because I don't then have to go to the store and wander the aisles and find out where it is. It's faster online, which is why people use Amazon a lot. I mean, because it's just so fast and easy. Just get it and have it shipped to you.
A zero waste version of that sounds great.
A zero waste version of that. And Amazon actually is getting better at zero waste, but we need to enable that for all of our local businesses as well. So there are other, startups that are working to have reusable containers and stuff. And often it's really nice to be able to look at, pick up, handle, view the item in person rather than just imagine what it's going to be like looking at the, sometimes they have videos and they have pictures and they have specs, but often you really want to get your hands on things. Like when you put on shoes or you try out clothing, you want to see if it fits you rather than ordering and having to send back. That's a lot of shipping both ways. And unfortunately, Amazon actually is starting to hide some of its costs from people and sort of getting them to pay in other ways. Because free shipping or the Prime, they've sort of hidden the shipping cost partly, although you're paying it, but in a different way. So we really want to pay attention to all of the costs of things so that you pay the full cost of an item.
That is something so central to climate and all of this is that just the costs of these things haven't been paid. The cost of spewing CO2 into the air hasn't been paid for the past century.
Yeah, and our CO2 levels are just way up.
Yeah,
So I'm a member of Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm active with them some,
I am
and
too.
yep, and
Yeah.
the Climate Reality Project, Al Gore's thing, and I became a trained official climate leader recently
Oh,
during
cool.
the pandemic. Without having actually, I was so excited because I didn't have to fly using a lot of CO2 to
Yeah,
get to one of their trainings. They
it
had
was
it
virtual.
online,
Yeah,
virtual, and so I had a good time. Met a lot of people from around the world during that training without having to leave my house, which is pretty amazing.
yeah,
And so I'm yeah, a climate leader also, and that the Climate Reality Project has great information about all the damage that CO2 is doing to our world and to our kids, our future,
yeah,
because we've got this unsustainable cycle set up that's we're headed towards some really big disasters that I would really like to see us avoid so that our kids can live a happy, meaningful, fun, enjoyable life and not a dystopian future, which is what
yeah.
we're currently headed toward.
Yeah, I would speak to both Citizens Climate Lobby and the Climate Reality Project as great organizations to check out if you want to, speaking to the viewer. They're solid climate stuff. They have lots of local chapters, so you can get involved pushing for big change, but also on the local level. Like recently, I've been doing stuff here in my town, Morgan Hill, trying to get the town on board with some climate policy. So, yeah, I recommend the groups both of the groups there. Solid to
Yep.
check out.
And to tie this back to Silicon Valley Bicycle
Yeah, of
Coalition,
course.
so Climate Reality Project says Climate Lobby, they're thinking big, think global, act local. SVBC is all about acting local.
Yeah,
And it's money extremely well spent. Bicycles are very efficient. Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition itself is very efficient.
yeah,
We take your money if you make a donation a long way by improving infrastructure, working with governments to make our local communities happier and healthier and more fun.
yeah. Very, very cool. And then one last question that I kind of ask at the end of all of these, though there's only been one before, but I plan to ask at all the other episodes. For the namesake of the podcast, uh, how do you feel about us, about humanity, the planet, our current setup, as we head towards 2030? This is the 2030 podcast. Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? How do you think things are looking in terms of sustainability, climate, uh, the temperature, plastics, any and all on the topic?
I'm both optimistic and pessimistic because
Okay.
we are at a crossroads right now. And it is so important for us to get on the right path and the
Yeah.
right trend. And it could head either direction. I don't want to get too much into politics, but wow, Trump was heading us down the wrong road,
Yeah.
and Biden now has us on a much better road. And we need to trust science. Science plays a really important part, and our media plays a huge important part. That's how we get information, because not all of us are scientists. Not
Yeah.
all of us, we have to trust our source of information. So our libraries, our news media, our education that we get, it has to be founded on science, has to all work together with it. And we have to have our government decisions made based on great information, accurate information that's well vetted
Yeah.
and trusted and proven to work. Not just someone's feeling or shooting from the hip kind of thing. We want to make sure that when we make choices, they're well thought out choices
Yeah.
that have all the consequences accounted for so that we get the right outcomes.
Yeah, very much so. And at least on my side, very happy to go into politics, like the talking about it. But yeah, happy that we are now federally in a much more directed towards climate action position. Definitely, there's plenty of stuff to do further, and that's like part of what, say, CCL or other groups are pushing for is like stronger action to limit emissions. But we are on a better place rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, and hopefully, say something like COP26 later this year, we get stronger international pushes towards that, and hopefully, small conversations like this can help to some degree just push the general consensus forward with getting more people on board with more climate action, more sustainability, less car use, more bike use, and all of that.
And to make this a little more real for your listeners, the
Sure.
viewers, you just think about your own budget. you don't have unlimited funds to spend. You want to manage yourself within a budget so you can keep going forward, not go into debt or bankruptcy, or end up in jail. With our Earth, we've been treating it like it's got an unlimited bank account, and it is not unlimited. Our Earth is finite, and we have to live within the budget of our Earth. There's a day called Earth Overshoot Day, which is when mankind exceeds the budget, as it were, that Earth can supply sustainably resources back to us. Before COVID, we'd actually had the day we went over budget was the end of July 31st.
Okay.
We were actually at break even. 1970, December 31st, was we sort of used as much resources as we consumed based on the best scientific calculations that we still have. In 1970, we're roughly barely in balance. But since then, we've been over consuming. We have to get back to living within our budget. We can't spend infinite amount of resources. We can't pollute infinitely. Those all have consequences, CO2 and climate change and everything. So if we all we all need to live responsibly. If we all get that and then follow that, we'll do it for ourselves, get our governments to do it, have corporations do it. Then we'll have a sustainable Earth, and our kids will have a happy future. Otherwise, in nature, all equations must balance. It's just a fundamental fact. We're a relatively closed system of energy coming in from the sun, but everything on Earth is here, and we've got to deal with what we've got.
Yeah.
If we don't honor, or we don't remember that very important piece of nature is going to come back and bite us. We're going to pay sooner or later. There is no free lunch.
Yeah.
Then we won't burden our kids with the debt that we're building up now, because they will have to pay it back someday. And so I'd rather have us balance the budget now, and we live a happy life. That's why, again, me as an example, I've been in Silicon Valley. I was able to make a lot of money, but I actually purposely reduced my income. I used to work for high-tech companies, Apple, Adobe, Sun, and made money there. I chose to work for Silicon Valley Bicyclists, even though that cut my pay a huge amount. I am living within that smaller budget, and still having a reasonable life by spending less, by biking instead of driving, so I can save my costs. Because if we don't live within the budget now, we'll have to cut our population painfully. Think of the COVID pandemic. That was a drop in the bucket, very trivial, little minor scrape compared to the disaster we're headed for if we don't live within our budget. Because we have basically twice as many people we can support if we continue to live the way we live now. And so we'll have to wipe out half the current Earth population, which would be really ugly, messy affair. Billions of people dying, that will really hurt. I'd rather have us maintain our population, but live super efficiently so that we could actually have a healthy, sustainable life. But we've got to not press the Earth so much. We've got to have more natural areas. We've got to make choices like bicycling instead of driving, or not, vacationing more locally, or if you go long distances, bicycle there like I've done. I'm going to bicycle hopefully all over the world at some point. And other people are bicycling all over the world. You can still see the world without having to fly a jet everywhere. And you get a much better appreciation for our Earth and meet more people. When you're flying a jet, you don't see anyone. You see the end and the beginning, but nothing in between. It's like doesn't exist. Bicycling, really appreciate what it takes to get from point A to point B. So I'd rather not see the hard consequences happen, where a lot of people dying, painfully so, with war, famine, environmental disasters. I'd rather have people live within a budget and be happy and joyous with what they have, and be, everything goes around, comes around. It's all about bicycling. It's all a cycle. Circular metaphor here. So
And one final question: how was biking in Boston, East Coast, New England? I grew up in upstate New York. Lots of rain, but more so the winters, the slush. How's biking in that?
So when I was in Boston, I have to admit, I didn't bike so much in slush or when the roads are icy. I did bike during the winter, but when I biked in the winter, I waited till the roads were well sanded or, fairly cleared off. The problem for me when biking in the winter was my water bottle froze. I couldn't drink. But there are ways around that. You can pack the water bottle on your body, keep it warmer so it doesn't quite freeze. And also they've got great tires that actually, I think, started in Finland. Studded bicycle tires are a godsend for biking in, messy weather. with ice and snow that you wouldn't be able to bike in.
Yeah.
Ice is really, snow you can use regular tires. You get a little bit of traction, but ice is really nasty for a bicyclist. With studded tires, you can actually go on those. Now I haven't used studded tires yet myself, but if I was in Boston, I've got friends still and live in Boston. Some of them have gone to studded tires. They bike year round to get around. Yeah.
Well, all right, that's the answer. Okay, well, that's it on my end. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have we did a little bit with the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, but if you want to shout out any project or initiative that you're doing or you're part of, or just something you think people should know about or take a look at, please feel free to right now.
Well, go to my other website, zerow.org. That has a lot of tips on going zero waste beyond the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, just bicycling. Do become a member of Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition at bikesiliconvalley.org. Join them. There actually is a small recycling project, courtesy of Colgate and TerraCycle and my own organization, zerow.org, where we collect oral care waste. And Colgate provides the funding. TerraCycle provides the remanufacturing. They take it in. But zerow.org does the collection. And then when we send the toothbrushes, empty toothpaste tubes, empty floss containers into that program, that gets recycled into playground equipment or other stuff that they can use recycled plastic.
Nice. And
Colgate then makes a small donation back to a charity, and that typically goes to Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. So being full circle. So go zerow.org/ let's see, oral, I think, or you just go on the website. There's a link there, and we've got 24/7 drop-offs that people can drop off in Sunnyvale, and hopefully we'll expand some of those so people can take their oral care waste and get it recycled, and then they'll benefit the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition by sending money their way, and then the waste doesn't go into the trash; it gets reused. And thankfully, again, kudos to Colgate and TerraCycle for getting the system set up. So it's an example of extended producer responsibility.
Yeah.
Colgate actually taking responsibility for anyone's waste, not just their own Colgate toothbrushes, but anyone's toothbrushes, anyone's toothpaste tubes, or the packaging around all of that. They'll take it all back and make something useful out of it again.
Nice.
So that's just really cool.
Yeah, it's good to hear. And I will include a link to that in the description. We'll have a link to the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, probably some of the groups we mentioned, and definitely that ZRW Oral one as well. That's it for me. Is there any parting comment you have, Tim, or does that cover it?
No, that pretty much covers it. I hope more people who see this will get inspired and just go bike. It's so much fun. And a lot of people during COVID have been biking.
Yeah.
And and get on the zero waste cycle, and it makes it you encourage your friends and have a good time.
Yeah, it's something that I definitely want to step farther into, do better for me, and hopefully we can all try to do better with each other. So Tim, thank you very much for coming to this second episode of the 2030 podcast. To the viewer or listener, thank you for watching or listening. Hope you enjoyed. And there will be more episodes coming along of more talks about climate change and various kinds of topics around that, whether that be bikes, political action like we covered in the first video, or something completely brand new. So thank you for watching. Hope you have a good day.